Hello, everyone. This is Rob. Today I'm going to talk about a question I see a lot of times when I'm perusing the Reddits or talking to some friends, and they are thinking about buying a computer and they're trying to figure out what's the right machine for them. So you'll see a lot of questions about, is this the right build? Or how does this build look for me? Or they might even say, what do you think about this? Deal going on? Is this a good computer? Those are very general, basic type of questions that really don't get to the root of the matter. Every time you're looking at buying a PC, there's some things you really got to ask yourself and then move from there to make a decision on what is a good machine for you, what is a good build for you. Um, they kind of really boil down to three main questions you have to ask yourself when you're building a computer. The first one is, what am I going to be using this machine for? Am I going to be gaming? Am I learning to develop software? Am I going to mine cryptocurrency? Those are the type of things that you're asking yourself to see what's the kind of tool that I need. You don't want to basically take a mallet for a job that really requires a hammer or those type of things. So you really got to ask that question. What am I using this computer for? The other thing that you really want to ask is, how long are you going to be using this machine to do that task? How long do you expect the longevity of this new device that you're purchasing will last for the intended purposes that you're using it for? Those things can be extended if you overbuild and you overbuy, so that you might not be using all the power that it has right now, but down the time, as time goes on and as you gain in knowledge or you gain in sophistication on what you're going to be using the machine for, the machine is ready for those type of activities you're going to ask for it to do. So that's the other thing you really want to ask. What kind of longevity are you expecting out of this tool that you're purchasing? Finally, is your budget. Now, a lot of times when people hear the word budget, they go like, how cheap can I buy it? Budgets is not a cost. Budgets can be a large budget, right? It could be a middling budget or it could be a small budget. So depending upon what kind of capital you wish to invest to solve a certain task that you have a certain value associated to, you're going to build a budget based upon the value proposition you feel you need to fulfill. So if it's of vital importance to you, you're a software developer and this is your livelihood, your budget might be a lot larger than someone who is just kind of tinkering with software development, because your value to the tool that you're purchasing either increases or decreases based upon that value you put on the tool and what you're going to be doing with it. But budget's important, right? You need to understand how much capital you yourself are willing to invest for this tool. And then from there, you will tailor make your decisions on the pieces of the computer that will get you the most bang for the buck based upon what you need to do. So keep those three things in mind as we go through the about 5 different areas when you're configuring a machine that you're thinking about. And then we'll get to some intangibles later. So hopefully this will be insightful to you. And if you do think it's insightful and you think it's a good listen and a good watch on YouTube, please give me a thumbs up. If you don't think it's a great lesson, give me a thumbs down. Tell me what I did wrong in the comments, and I'll try to get better at this as time goes on. But so let's get started. Computer decisions really first boil down to what CPU you want to put into your computer. Right now there's 2 main companies that make CPUs in the consumer market sphere, and that is Intel and AMD. Each one of them have their own advantages and disadvantages. I'm not going to get tremendously involved in what is the advantages of AMD and what is the advantages of Intel, but I will let you know some basic principles about the two, and I really want to guide you more toward what are you looking for your CPU to do, and then both brands have the ability to tailor make a choice to what you want it to do. Some of them do it a little bit better at better price points than others, depending upon exactly what you want. So let's get into that first. So as you ask yourself what you want your computer to do, you're going to one of the first questions you're going to see is, am I going to overclock this CPU? Now, what overclocking does is it gives you the ability to kind of tinker with your engine of your computer, so to speak. Just like how people tinker with their engines of their car, right, to try to get the most horsepower out of them. It's the same thing was happening with overclocking. People are tinkering with their CPU to try to get the most performance out of it. It's kind of like an enthusiast type of thing to do. A lot of people really enjoy seeing exactly what they can squeeze out of their CPU that they got in their machine. It's almost like a little game, and it's kind of fun. I enjoy it a lot. So there are certain CPUs that are what are called unlocked, not unclocked. It's unlocked. They are unlocked so that you can alter some of the parameters to overclock them. Those are the X series you'll see in the AMD and the K series in Intel. So if you think you might be interested in playing with this, you might want to look at those type of CPUs if you want to see how much performance I can squeeze out of this. Now you're going to pay a little bit more of a premium for these unlocked chips than the ones that are locked. But if you feel that that's something you might be interested in, spend the extra money because you put some value toward that. The other interesting thing too is a lot of times you'll notice these unlocked chips have a little bit higher clock frequencies than the unlocked chips. Than the locked chips. The locked chips tend to run at a lower frequency, while the unlocked chips have a higher boost frequency. It's just the way it is. I think when AMD and when Intel bin their chips to decide these are going to be my K chips or my X chips, they take the ones that they know have a little bit better quality silicon, and they can know that right off the bat they can boost their clock speeds during boost conditions more reliably at a higher clock. So, and they also then become their unlocked chips to allow enthusiasts to play even further up the chain in the frequencies. So just take that into mind too. So if clock frequency is important to you, and we'll get into that next, then maybe that X chip and K chip might be interesting to you, even though you might not even think about overclocking, but you want to get the most boost clock frequencies for your money. So talking about clock frequencies, that's a bias that I talk about. There are CPU biases. One is being biased toward clock frequencies. One is being biased towards cores, and one is being biased toward threads. That will lead you to different either generations of CPU Intel or different manufacturers in and of itself because of the great price points you can get at higher clock speeds or higher core counts. Those are the type of things that really kind of influence your decision on the CPU you want to use. AMD, for example, has a very good price point for against performance when you're talking about core counts, the number of cores in the CPU. You get AMD, you're going to get the most amount of cores for your money versus Intel. It's just the way it works. That's how they compete against Intel. While Intel has a more strong bias toward frequencies, clock frequencies. They really kind of gear toward those enthusiast markets to see how fast you can get their chips running at, and go toward that market sphere more so than the core counts. Now they have CPUs out there with plenty of core counts. You're just going to pay a lot more for an Intel 8-core CPU versus an AMD 8-core CPU. The AMD is going to be running at a little bit slower clock speeds, while the Intel is going to be running at a little bit higher clock speeds. So those are interesting things. Now, some people know that, hey, that frequency is very important for gaming, and it is. It is probably the most influential thing that the CPU spec that will influence your gaming is that clock speed. So if you're only thinking about gaming, then the most important thing for you is not the number of cores you have on the chip. 4 cores will be sufficient. 6 cores, more than sufficient. 8 cores, don't need them unless of course you're playing one of those few games that do take advantage of all those cores. Then you probably lean more toward Intel because of those higher clock frequencies. But if, say, you are a budding developer or a seasoned developer and you are looking to set up virtual machines in your computer, the important thing is for you then the number of cores you have, because then you can kind of carve up your computer into small mini computers with a single core dedicated to those little mini computers. So then you want more cores so you can create these virtual machines, and the cheaper you can get these cores for, the better. I can have more virtual machines. So that might be important to you. Finally, the thing some people get confused with is threads. So think of threads almost like a core. They're not exactly a core, but Intel developed a technology called hyperthreading, but let's just get rid of the jargon, right? It's just basically what that is originally in each clock cycle, the computer can do one instruction. And that's basically, as you get faster and faster clock speeds, I can do more and more instructions in a period of time. So basically, you're just kind of divvying up time into smaller bits with higher clock speed. So that's what they were beforehand, right? One instruction can get it done. Now with threads, you can now have your computer operate on 2 instructions in that same interval. So it's like having 2 cores. So now you see, like in the Intel 9th generation chips, their CPUs, unless you got really high into them, only offered 1 thread per core. 10th generation now, to compete with AMD, they have started reintroducing the two threads per core concept that they had in the 8th generation, but they kind of removed it in the 9th generation. For what reason, I don't know. But AMD kind of kicked them in the pants a little bit, and so they reintroduced them into the consumer level i5s, i7s that they kind of pulled them back from in the 9th generation. So that's a great thing for us consumers. Competition's great, right? But what those threads do, if you're doing something that can really take advantage of a lot of cores, a lot of instructions that needs to be done at the same time, such as solid modeling in CAD or video editing, so you can scrub back and forth in these huge files and process all this data to kind of do what you need to do. Those things take advantage of a lot of instructions happening on the CPU at the same time, and those multiple cores, multiple threads really help in those type of workloads. So if you're a video editor, you might want to stay away from the Intel 9th generation because they don't have multi-threading. But you can definitely use them in the 10th generation, maybe even some of the older 8th generation if you're okay with the clock speeds. So those are the type of things that you're going to make value decisions on. So now let's kind of go from CPU into graphics card. That's the next big area where people spend a lot of money and decision time and brain burn to try to figure out what they need. So what kind of graphics card are you going to get, right? The question is what are you going to be doing with this graphics card? Are you going to just be gaming? Okay, that's a typical use of graphics cards. It's probably the most prevalent use of graphics card. But other people use graphics cards for other things. Sometimes they are software developers that kind of offload some of that computational load that normally would happen in the CPU off to the graphics card processing unit to do that computational work, because graphics cards are really good at doing math for rendering graphics. And so a lot of times people who are doing cryptocurrency machines that are doing algorithms with math calculations have a lot of graphics cards in a machine to kind of do that computational workload for them. Also, if you're involved in computer programming and you're doing some deep learning development, that's another heavily used area of graphics cards. So what you're going to do is you're going to really ask yourself, what am I going to be using this graphics card outside of gaming, if that is the case. But if you are going to be gaming with it, which is, again, the majority of people are making a decision on with their graphics card, there's a couple things you really have to know. People are always wanting to get the most FPS. Now, FPS is great, right? It's a good barometer of showing you how well your graphics card can handle a certain game, and it's a great benchmark. But there's a lot of things that go into actual real-world application of a game and frames per second. One of them is being the monitor that you're using. If you're going to buy a laptop, and you only have a 60 hertz screen on your laptop, the fastest you can get without any kind of artifacts or screen tearing on your screen is about 60 frames per second. So the question is why would you need more graphics card processing power if all I really need is 60 frames per second at this maximum resolution that my monitor works at on my laptop? And of course, I'm never going to hook it up to an external monitor. Now, if you're going to hook it up to an external monitor, you have other questions to say, oh, but my external monitor can run at this resolution and then at this refresh rate. So then you might say, yeah, it's definitely worth it for me to get that next level of graphics card because I have tools that will work in conjunction with my new device that can take advantage of that power. So definitely kind of take a look at, especially with graphics cards, what is the visual element you're going to be using to see the presentation of the graphics if it's for gaming. So if it's just the monitor screen that's on your laptop, make sure you just pair a graphics card equal to the the monitor that comes with your panel that comes with your laptop. If you think you might eventually hook it up to an external monitor, a gaming monitor with high refresh rates and more resolution, then yeah, get the bigger graphics card. It also will help with the resale value of the device as well, because if you're going to be using this and you're only going to use the panel that's on the monitor, on the laptop, then that's great, right? But someone who might purchase the laptop from you down the road might be actually wanting to hook it up to an external monitor. And if you have the higher end graphics card in there, it's going to be more appealing to them. So those are just type of things to think about. So finally, getting back into cryptocurrency and deep learning and what kind of graphics card you might need for that. There's really only one rule of thumb for that. Basically, you get the most powerful graphics card you can get that you can afford in your budget. It's just the way it is. The more power and performance you have, the more computational workload you can take, and that's good in those type of environments. But there's a point of diminishing returns for power and performance versus and price. So you have to make that decision yourself. So when you see, oh well, this graphics card is about 20% more performant than this graphics card, but it's also going to cost about 40% more than that graphics card. You have to make that value decision. Is that 20% in raw performance for that graphic card worth the 40% in cost on the device to you? That's your value proposition that you got to make. I can't give you that answer. Only you can get that answer yourself. Let's now move to another big question that people ask about is RAM. RAM is the memory where your computer CPU accesses most of their workload from. It's very fast communication between the computer and the CPU and the RAM. So having as much RAM that the computer can access will allow your programs to run better. So right now, 16 gigabytes is pretty much the standard you want so that you can lower your stress levels with your device. If you go with the 8, you'll get by. You won't have a problem have it with your computer, but you'll more than likely will run into issues as you start using your computer more and more. Windows alone will take about 25% of 8 gigabytes of RAM just from starting it up. After that, you're going to start installing software on your machine that will automatically, kind of kick on when you turn on your computer. One of them is being your antivirus. Me personally, I use Windows Defender. It's free, it's good, it uses minimal resources, and it's not very intrusive. It's not always bugging me, so I use it. So it's a great piece of software that I get for free that that works for me. But you know what? It was added on top of my Windows, so that's going to take more memory. The next thing you're going to be loading up your stuff that controls your graphics cards or controls your Wi-Fi or controls all these other pieces of hardware and software in your machine that kind of run in the background, especially if you're a gamer. You have a lot of game launchers that kind of start up in the beginning. You have tools to help you with overclocking that might start up in the beginning. And all of a sudden, before you know it, 50% of your RAM is used if you only have 8 gigabytes of RAM to begin with. just from turning on your dang computer. That doesn't give you a lot of headroom after that, right? You can launch your game and everything might be working just fine. It's moving stuff in and out of memory, but eventually it's going to hit that memory threshold and it's going to go into this dreaded area of your computer called page space. Now, page space is where the operating system reserves some space on your physical storage devices, your SSDs and your hard drives, to actually use as memory if memory becomes depleted on your normal RAM. So you don't get that dreaded out of memory error messages we used to get about 30 years ago. So, you don't get the error, but what you do get is sluggishness. Your computer starts to seem a lot slower in operating those tasks because it's accessing information, the CPU, at an area that is not nearly as fast as RAM. So it's basically, you're asking, Usain Bolt to get the information back and forth this whole time, and then all of a sudden Usain Bolt, is at capacity. I can't ask Usain to do anything more. But, grandma over there in the corner, she's more than happy to help get me some of the stuff, but I'm going to have to wait a nice long time as grandma kind of shuffles her feet to bring me that information. So that's basically what happens in page space, right? So yeah, you'll get that sluggishness. Games might freeze on you and drop frames, and that's just what happens. So you want to stay away from that. You don't want that to happen to you. That's why I always recommend 16 gigabytes. The next question a lot of people ask about is memory speeds. Memory speeds definitely do help with performance. I'm not going to say it doesn't, but their boost in performance that you get for going up to the different and higher, faster memory speeds is minimal compared to, like, if you were going to spend that money on upgrading your graphics card or upgrading your CPU. But if you want to spend, if it's not a unreasonable amount of money to upgrade those speeds, you might want to think about doing it because you will get some performance gain out of it. It's just, again, the price performance ratio that you might want to think about and say, all right, if I don't boost this up, I got an extra $50 then to kind of maybe, if there's a sale on the CPU, I can go from this CPU to the next CPU. So those are the type of trade-offs you're going to make, and think about with memory speed a lot of times. AMD tends to benefit more with faster memory than Intel CPUs. Again, I don't have any firsthand knowledge of that, but from all the tech blogs that I read and all the different pieces of research that I've seen and benchmarks that I've seen, it looks like AMD chips definitely do get a little bit more benefit out of the faster memory. So if you're doing an AMD CPU and you are presented with some faster memory speed options, it might be worth a little bit more to you to think about that increase in speed for you, specifically because you're using an AMD processor, more so than someone who might have chosen an Intel processor. So again, take that for what it's worth. One of the other big areas you're going to think about when speccing a computer and deciding what kind of build you want is your storage. And it's a storage decision that you're going to make. Now, it's now 2020, and why manufacturers ship operating systems on spinning platter physical disks is a little bit beyond me. I don't know why they do that anymore. It's kind of a interesting scenario that they do it, but it's like a scenario that, it's such a great performance gain that you get for just going to an SSD versus a spinning platter, that really you should always have your operating system, your primary storage device, be a solid state drive. You will have a much more pleasurable computer experience. It's one of those upgrades that people do a lot of times on their older system to kind of breathe new life into their machine and make it kind of feel new again. Your system just operates so much faster, and it feels snappier. Things kind of just pop all the time, and you don't have to sit and wait and kind of have a coffee and tea moment. But there's a drawback with SSDs because they can kind of get confusing. There's a lot of acronyms that kind of get thrown around with SSDs, and not all SSDs are created equally. And these acronyms kind of give you clues on what SSDs performances are going to be. So hopefully I'm going to give you a little bit of information to kind of demystify that. One of the SSDs that you'll see a lot of times are what are called SATA SSDs. Now, SATA SSDs operate a lot faster than the traditional spinning platter hard drives, and they are perfectly viable boot drives. But they are not the fastest SSDs out there. They're on a protocol called the SATA protocol to transfer the data back and forth, and it just operates at a slower speed than the newer PCIe NVMe SSDs. These ones operate on the PCIe channel that is runs at much faster bandwidths than the SATA bandwidths. So they're, as I said, they're not all created equal. PCIe NVMe SSDs can be anywhere from 3 to 10 times faster than these SATA SSDs, which are, again, factors faster than the old spinning plate hard drives. So a lot of times, if you can see that your manufacturer or the system builder that you have is putting a PCIe NVMe SSD, you know right then and there you're in the most the newest technology in SSDs to kind of give you the fastest data transfer rate from your storage, and that's a good thing. Again, those PCIe NVMe technology is just continuing to grow and grow. Some of the initial ones, were 3 times faster than the SATA SSDs. Now you can see some of them getting close to 10 times faster than the SATA SSD. So I don't know how much humans can see the difference between those. I can see the difference between a SATA and a PCIe, but I don't know if I can see the difference between a slower PCIe SSD to a blazing fast PCIe SSD. So it's kind of an interesting kind of game that's happening here now, right? So what is fast enough? I don't know. I guess we will never know until it's sort of like there's a law in computer technology. I can't remember the exact name of it, but we will consume that ability to go faster, and eventually we're going to say that these things that operated at 3 times faster than what SATA SSDs are just dog slow, just because our technology and our software has caught up to the hardware, and we're making use of that speed. So the faster the better, I always say, right? So anyway, that's could be kind of confusing, I understand, but the best way to kind of think about it is, right, you got your old hard drives, right, that are think of them as one of those old time cars, the Model T cars, just kind of going 30 miles an hour down the road, local road to get to the city, right? And now we have our modern cars, right? They're much faster than the Model Ts, but you can make a decision now to and that's our SSDs, the new modern cars, right? But you can make a decision on what road you want to take now, because we have that option in this new world. We can take the local roads, just like the Model T's going down to get to the city, right? Or we can take the highway. So if you're taking the local roads, but you're going still a lot faster than those old Model T's, that's sort of like your SATA SSDs. But if you decide to take the highway on your in your car, that's sort of like the PCIe NVMe SSDs that get you to the city a lot faster, and in this case, your CPU a lot faster. So that's the story with SSDs. Back to hard drives now. There's, as I said, a place for mechanical hard drives. It's a great place to kind of do your bulk storage, your photos, your videos, your essays from college, spreadsheets, all those type of things, which just can just grow and grow and grow in size. And hard drives you can get at such a low price for these huge volumes. You can buy a 2 terabyte platter spinning head spinning disk hard drive for like $55, and you can store like the Library of Congress on it. It's just amazing of amount of storage you can get for the price with these things. So they definitely have a place. I just tell people when they're looking at a hard drive, if they're building one, try to get one with as much cache as possible, because that will just help in the long run, because if a computer does need to get information from one of these spinning plate hard drives, it will spin up and grab the information, send it to the CPU. When it got the information, it's going to store that information that it just retrieved into this area called cache, just in case the computer ever asks for it again. And it very well might. A lot of times in processing, the computer might access that same bit of data a lot of times. Now, the computer CPU has its own cache, and the memory, and it also throws it into memory as it's using it. But depending upon, the process, it might have, it's now out of the CPU's cache, and it threw it into memory, and now it's kind of, it's either gotten stale or what have you, or it's no longer available in RAM, and the computer now has to go back to the hard drive to get the information again. The nice thing is you got that fail-safe on that hard drive, where it has its own little pieces of silicon in the hard drive off the spinning disks that says, yeah, I remember you just asked for this like not too long ago. I kept it in my own little memory. Here you go. And it's a lot faster than getting it off the spinner disk. So that's what I recommend when you're looking at a regular hard drive. How much cache does it have? The Seagate Barracuda ones have a tremendous amount of cache. So if you see the internal specs of your machine that you're purchasing has a Seagate Barracuda hard drive in there, the spinning plate hard drive, you'll know that you got a hard drive that has a lot of good cache. Finally, let's get involved with some really the kind of like nitty gritty, not just the minutia of some decisions you can make. That being cooling decisions and power decisions on your computer. So I'm not going to get heavy involved in there, but basically desktop cases with good airflow and good fans and a good heat sink, air cooling is more than sufficient for most people. Liquid cooling has become a lot more accessible to the masses, especially with the advent of the all-in-one cooling solutions. But a lot of times people just don't need them if you have a good case with good airflow and good fans and a good heat sink. It's just not a needed thing. If you are an enthusiast and you are going to be overclocking, you're going to be doing those type of things, then you might want to think about liquid cooling, because overclocking just brings more heat to the whole equation. And liquid cooling is just better at dissipating heat versus airflow. So if you're thinking about overclocking, you might want to think about liquid cooling. Another good thing about liquid cooling is they tend to be a little bit more quiet than the fans, right? Because if you get some heat going, you're doing a lot of gaming or you're doing a lot of number crunching, those fans could start to spin up in your computer, and you can get that hair blower effect where it sounds like a vacuum cleaner. So they can, they do tend to run quieter, the liquid cooling ones, because they keep the temperatures down better, and it just doesn't require as much pulling of in cold air, because they're doing a better job in managing the heat. Also, if you do find your air-cooled solution going into hair blower mode, it doesn't mean you have to go to liquid cooling, right? There are plenty of fans out there that you can buy that are quieter than the ones that you might have currently stock in your machine, that you can just change out, and it will be quieter than the original stock fans, and that might solve your problem. They also might even be able to pull in more cubic feet per minute than the stock fans, so it's getting more cool air in, and it might solve your heating problem. So you don't have to just jump to liquid cooling if you think things. So there's different things that you might want to think about there. I just wanted to give you an understanding of what liquid cooling does and what's its benefits versus air cooling, and do you really need liquid cooling, or can you live with air cooling? The last thing you're probably going to see a lot of times is a decision on how big your power supply is going to be. Now, you're not going to get that decision with laptops. You're going to see that more along the line with desktops. Laptops, you have your designated battery that comes with your laptop and your power brick. Computers, desktop computers, you might get the decision on how big of a power supply you want. Now, the manufacturer's not going to sell you a system that can't power on. So whatever you configure, your power supply unit's going to be more than sufficient to kind of deal with what you currently have in your system. But that doesn't kind of take into effect if you might want to eventually upgrade any of your components. A CPU that has a bigger power draw, or a new graphics card that has a bigger power draw. If you're kind of just right at the top end of your power supply, it's going to limit your choices in upgrade. And that's one of those intangible items that you think about when you're purchasing a computer, which is a perfect segue to my final area of talk is intangibles. So we kind of really outlined the whole guts of your computer, but there are intangibles that you have that you want to make a decision on when you are purchasing a computer. How important is portability to you? Do you want to move your device around? If it's got a very high importance to you, you'll be looking at a laptop versus a desktop. I found I used to use laptops exclusively, but my most recent laptop, I noticed, it was just never leaving my desk. So I said to myself, Rob, why am I, using a laptop here in this situation? I can take that money that I am paying a premium for in a laptop for portability and use that money elsewhere into areas that I feel have more value to me now in my situation. So portability is one of those intangibles that you're going to think about. If you don't think your computer is going to be moving around a lot, then you might opt for a more beefy, thicker computer or a laptop than an ultra portable, very thin one, and versus paying that premium for that ultra portability. Again, it all depends upon what you want to do. Heat performance decisions are going to be involved in your intangibles. Gaming laptops just run hot, right? And especially if you go to a thinner one. So if you get a thicker one, you might be spending a little less money, but you won't have as much performance and heating issues as the super thin ones. The super thin ones also might require you to be a little bit more of an enthusiast and tinker around so that you can get the best performance for the heat characteristics for the equipment that you have. So, those ultra thin laptops that can call themselves gaming laptops can become a little bit more of a difficult beast to tame than a little thicker gaming computer that might have better airflow and you won't have to worry so much about thermal throttling and all those other little things. Another thing you will think about is aesthetics, right? Do you want more RGB on your machine, or do you want something that's a little more understated and minimalistic? Do you want a white chassis? Do you want a steel chassis or a plastic chassis? These are going to all make a decision, have some effect on the cost of your machine. If you want that really overbuilt feel like those MacBook Pros have, and not be as plastic feeling as some other laptops, you're going to pay a premium for it. But you know what? It's going to also not have as much flex, and it's going to just kind of have a more nicer fit and finish. And if that's something that's important to you, you're going to think that's, you're going to put more value toward that. Especially with laptops, and since we're kind of talking a little bit about laptops now, one of the most important things is how does the keyboard feel to you, and the location and the feel of the trackpad for you. If you get an opportunity to kind of test drive your laptops that you're thinking about purchasing, definitely do it. See how the keyboard feels to you. See if the keys are in the same position that you expect them to be. You're not making so many errors as you're typing. And it doesn't have a number pad. I need to have a number pad. Those type of things. Some of the sacrifices that you make in the smaller form factor of a laptop that you have to decide, is this keyboard really going to just drive me up a wall and I'm going to want to drop kick this unit out my window, or it's going to work for me. Trackpad location is another thing that kind of throws people for a loop. It's too big or it's too small, or every single time I'm typing, I hit my trackpad and the mouse moves and it clicks and I don't want it to click, right? So those are the type of things that, if you get to test drive this laptop, definitely, if you get a chance to, definitely do it, because those little idiosyncrasies about using the laptop in the way a laptop's used can either make it or break it for you. Some of the other final things that I kind of think about when I think about intangibles is upgradeability. Laptops just don't tend to be as upgradable as desktop, but there are definitely laptops out there that can have a huge amount of upgrade potential. Some of them now have socketed CPUs where you can actually change the CPUs in and out. They sell GPU kits that you can change the GPUs in and out. Some of them have external devices where you can plug in onto your laptop a cable to this external device where you can put in a over-the-counter, retail GPU into that box, and that graphics card in that box now is going to run all your games for your laptops. So they have a lot of different things out there now that makes laptops a little bit more upgradable than they were in the past. So that's a great thing, but they cost, and it's upgradability comes at a cost in laptops. Meanwhile, upgradability is sort of inherent and baked in to the desktop scenario. You basically open up the case, you change out the part, and you put in the new part. It's like working on an engine. I can change out the transmission, I can change out the engine, I can change out this. That's what you get with the desktop, more so than a laptop. But as I said, laptops are starting to get some upgradability going for them, but it definitely comes at a premium. Also, you might want to think about resale. Resale is sometimes important to people. I know I change out my computers every 3 to 5 years, and I usually resell them, on the second-hand marketplaces. Facebook, Craigslist. Over where I live, there's a thing called KSL, which is sort of like the Facebook of Utah. Not the Facebook, the KSL of Utah. So thinking about resale of your machine is maybe important to you. If you buy a MacBook Pro, you're buying a device that probably has the highest resale out there in the tech world. MacBooks just hold their value. People put a value to the Mac ecosystem, and they just hold their value very well. PC side of the fence, there are a few name brands that are out there that hold their value more so than other ones. Like the ones that come to mind are Razer and Alienware. Those ones have specific name recognition, and especially in the gaming community, that people know that they make good devices and are willing to spend the money. Plus, a lot of times these laptops from Razer, from Alienware, tend to be overbuilt. So even though it's 3 years old, it was overbuilt when it was built 3 years ago. So that power equation still makes the laptop extremely viable today. So they held their value more so than something that people bought from another company, such as HP or Dell or any of those other ones, which are perfectly fine machines, but they just don't hold their value as much because they're more consumer grade type of stuff, and to get people doing the tests that they need to do today. But as 3 years goes down the road, the software has outpaced the hardware, and now the hardware is going to struggle with any of the new software that's out there, so they don't have as much value to people anymore. So if you think if that's one of those intangibles that are important to you, resale value, kind of take a look out there, see what sells well on your Facebook marketplace, on Craigslist, and you'll see which ones are in demand versus ones that are not so much in demand. Finally, intangibles. A lot of people need to think about warranty and support. When you build your own machine, you kind of have the warranty for each one of the components, but it's up to you to kind of be tech support, right? To figure out what went wrong. This is the component that went wrong. Pull it out, get the RMA with your manufacturer for that device, for that specific component, ship it out to them, and get a new one back, right? It's a lot of hassle, right? There's not much support. Your support. There might be warranties for each one, and then you got these scattered warranties. This device right here and here might have a 5-year warranty. This one might have a 1-year warranty. This one has a 3-year warranty. So you have this hodgepodge of warranties versus one single warranty for the whole device, and that might be of value to you. Support also, right? If you buy a machine from a system builder or a system integrator, you have a phone number that you can call, and that's valuable to some people, right? I don't know a lot about computers. I just want to call them up and tell them what the symptoms are and have them diagnose it. Now, some support is good, some support's not good. Again, you can do your own research for each company and see what people think about their support, and you can make a decision and put on a value on those support teams for those companies. I'll leave that up to you. The other thing you'll notice too is, like, sometimes when you're dealing with where you have to get something fixed after the support kind of goes through their diagnostics and stuff like that, you might have to ship your machine to a depot for repair. And sometimes you might even have to be responsible for paying the shipment to get your machine to that depot. Sometimes you don't. Depends upon the company. You have to do your research there. Some places don't have a shipping depot. Some of them have in-home repairs. Now that's great, but you might be paying a premium for the in-home repair for that company. So again, each one of these things has your own value that you have to make a decision on. If it's worth it to you, definitely kind of look at the different options and you can make your own decisions there. Well, that's about it. I hope this was informative to you. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments. I will try to get back to you as soon as I can. If you like these type of videos, give me a thumbs up. If you didn't think I did a good job, give me a thumbs down. Let me know in the comments what I did wrong so I can get better at this as I go along. Again, my name is Rob. I wish everybody a good day. Be kind to one another and peace.